Real quick, before we begin today's video, I wanted to announce that we have been officially recognized by Snowprint as a content creator. And as such, we are doing our first in-game giveaway. We have decided to give away Abraxas, or 130 of his shards if you have him already, to match today's theme. Please also note that this video was recorded to obtaining official access, and I am already in the works to fully test out some of the characters that need testing, and will be posting an update very soon. Some of these characters we just didn't really break down in this video just due to the fact that we weren't sure how certain aspects really worked. I'm doing my best to really capture those specific instances and how best to make sure that you're all informed, so stay tuned. Also, in an effort to increase channel and content quality, Muse has dedicated hours into editing this video. There have been many learning curves as we work to land on the right software and editing practices, so please, let us know your feedback so we can continue to improve as a channel. So stay tuned for how you can get your chance to win Abraxas and enjoy our first tier list video. Hello fellow tacticians. As promised, it is finally time for the Chaos tier list. Recently, I have collected a team of experienced and knowledgeable individuals, and together we have gone through each Chaos character and assigned them to different categories based on several different criteria. PvP, guild raids, campaigns, and even legendary release events. Now, I would like to note that this list is highly opinionated and subjective, and should be taken with a grain of salt. If you have different opinions, I'd love to hear them. Leave them down in the comment section below if you feel that we didn't do a character justice, or if you feel like maybe we over-prioritized and maybe have a higher opinion of a character than you do. Also, I would like to note, changes to balancing, this could and will include new Diamond 2 release and upcoming raid boss, may shift the balance of this and all future lists. DZG Tacticus will do its best to update you once we are certain of any new information. We have gone through each of these characters, taken a look at stats, just general performance and how each character is used, and assigned them to one of the following categories. Top tier. This is for characters that are undeniably strong in multiple aspects, so they could perform extremely well in Onslaught, Campaign, Guild Raids, etc., etc. And they will perform well in each of these categories or more than most other characters, and are worth prioritizing other characters over other characters in this list. Now, this is specifically for the Chaos faction. The reason we are breaking these lists out into the different factions is so you, as a player, will know how to prioritize your specific resources. Whether that's going to be badges or orbs, we really want you to be able to know how best to prioritize your characters. For example, if you only have 10 epic orbs, it's going to be a lot better to prioritize a top tier character than it would be a character in the weak tier. Moving into the strong category, this character will perform strongly in at least one category, but other characters may do the job better. The average is for characters that are passable in a role and should be considered if you don't have other options. The weak lacks testing category is for characters that are mediocre and can be beat out by multiple other characters performing this role. Now, mind you, with the newest Chaos characters coming to the game, there are going to be some characters that might fall into this role that we simply just do not know enough about at this time. This list will be updated as soon as we are certain where these characters will really fall in this list. The pass tier is this character should not be upgraded unless you just really like this character or you really need it for something very niche. Before we begin with our first character, let's take a look at how we're going to be doing the format for this tier list video. To start off, for each character, we're going to go ahead and spin an RNG wheel. This will hopefully keep things a little fresh instead of working our way top to bottom, or specifically focusing on one faction and then moving into the other. We're just going to have it completely randomized. So the RNG wheel will select a character, and then we're going to bring that character's stats and abilities up. We have pulled all the information for each of these characters off of the IVS bot, which is a fantastic tool to use, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the video. So we're going to take a look at the stats. We're going to talk really about what makes the character that character, and then we're going to move forward into actually placing this character on the tier list, and then break down the reasons for why we felt that the character deserved to go where it eventually landed. Now that we have talked about this, let's start with our first character. So let's spin the wheel for our first character. We only have 15 to go through, and it's the reason we picked Chaos to start off with. And for our first character, we've got Malletus. So let's bring up Malletus' stats and abilities. Now, quick caveat, everything that you're going to see in this video will be completely maxed out. Legendary, all the way up to Blue Star, every character at Diamond 2, and every ability at rank 50. Now, mind you, we did not rank each character based on these stats, per se. And the reason is we feel it's pretty unrealistic for everybody to have these characters, or maybe even get some of these characters, to this level. We just wanted to show you the absolute full potential of the character, and then maybe dial it back down a bit when we actually place them in the rankings. Taking a look at Malletus as our first character, he's going to be a member of the Death Guard faction. And we're going to be taking a look at some of their different abilities and fully explaining them the first time that you see each different ability. And then for the rest of the video, we're just going to kind of gloss right over it. So Malletus, like I said, being in the Death Guard, has the Contagions of Nurgle trait, which you'll see for every Death Guard character. And essentially, it's just blighting the map, and the more turns that go by, this aura will really spread. It's pretty nice if you have 2 Death Guard characters on the map, because you can get it all the way up to a 40% armor reduction. However, it doesn't scale past that, which is pretty negative in my opinion for the faction as a whole. Malletus also has Resilient. That means he will go all the way just right at 1 health unless he's overkilled, so kind of giving him a little bit of tankiness there in that aspect, giving him a chance to be healed, perhaps. And then he also has Terminator armor, which means the first time that he gets hit, he will take 75% reduced damage. Now, mind you, this doesn't apply for multiple hit characters, it's just the first hit of that chain. You see Malletus is melee only with a 3-hit melee attack and has no ranged ability. He has access to a crit item, a block item, and a block booster. And his stats, this is him at Diamond 2, so he eventually gets very tanky. But the big thing I want to highlight here is his movement too. Taking a look at Malletus' active ability, he performs a pretty strong melee swing, and if it does kill, it will carry over to the next target because of his passive ability, Haze of Corruption. Anytime he defeats his target, more damage will get carried over to the adjacent target, and it's a pretty decent way for him to be able to AoE cleave if he gets within range of target. Malletus can be obtained through guild raid reward crates and also requisition orders. Malletus is also, I believe, guaranteed to come to you in one of your early requisition pools, so you will have the access to this character fairly early. Now let's go ahead and place Malletus where we think he belongs. And ultimately, after discussion, we feel Malletus falls into the weak/lax testing category. And the reasoning is mainly his low movement ability. He starts all the way in the back lines and has a movement of 2. Yes, he's extremely tanky. Yes, if he gets a hold of you, it will hurt. But the problem is getting him there. He can be further assisted with later characters that we talk about that will increase movement speed for him, but we just don't feel it's enough to place him any higher. Now, a cross consideration for this is his tankiness, his ability to absolutely smack someone really hard, and the fact that you will get him early on as a character. Makes him pretty great to bring into the Fall of Cadia campaign, as you might not have other characters to utilize for that roster. But if you want to go deep in that campaign, highly recommend you swap him out with a different character in this list that we'll talk about later. And that's Malletus. Let's go ahead and move into our next character. Let's go ahead and spin our wheel again and see who we get this time. Alright, it looks like we have Harkin, World Claimer. So once again, pulling up Harkin's stats, he is going to be the first character that we have for the Black Legion. The Black Legion characters all have the Let the Galaxy Burn trait. Very RNG dependent. Whenever attacking an enemy, there's a 50% chance that you will hit an additional time, or a unit adjacent to it. So it can either go on the character that you're attacking, it could go onto the character next to the character that you're attacking, or it just doesn't do it at all. If that unit is not chaos, so it is specifically for non-chaos units, which for the most part, not that negative of a deal. However, you look at using this for the Mortarion raid, kind of falls off a little bit in that regard. He has access to flying, which is really nice. He has a crit item and a crit booster, so he can get his crit all the way up to 40% if you attach him with a gun. As well you should, because he's a 4-hit melee champion. No ranged attack. Fortunately for him, he does have pierce type damage, which makes it pretty good for legendary release events. But looking at it, at the end of the day, the max capability for his damage is 842, not very strong. To further compound Harkin's kind of RNG aspect is his active ability, Herald of the Apocalypse. He will attack a target, dealing pretty decent pierce damage, which is actually less hits than his base melee attack, and removes armor from them. He then will trigger battle fatigue for all enemy units within 2 hexes of the target. So, pretty decent for legendary release events and for his campaign. However, once again, very RNG. If you're not familiar with battle fatigue, it essentially causes a 10% chance to flee, or goes up to a 40% chance to flee if you overkill the initial target. His passive ability is very niche as well. Every time he defeats an enemy, he adds X amount of damage to his attacks for the rest of the battle. And if he actually does it to a character unit, he will then add +1 hits for the rest of battle. So, we've seen everything with Harkin. Let's take a look at where he falls. And after all those considerations and looking at the stats themselves, we ultimately feel that he falls in the average category. He does decent damage. You're almost guaranteed to get him because we didn't talk about it before, but you get him from campaign. You can get him from the mission crates as you get mission experience. You're going to get him probably before you get Archimatos. Now, a plus and minus for him is that he's required for the campaign. So you do want to invest into this character. He's required for the campaign, but also it would be nicer if you had a better character for this campaign that is required. Him having access to flying is really nice. He is pretty great for early game PvP in my personal opinion. You'll see him dominate pretty much all of the beginning categories. But then he falls off of a cliff, so not meta whatsoever. His pierce damage is going to be very beneficial for legendary release requirements that require you to bring pierce. But that's pretty much the only time that you're going to want to bring him. With the exception being the Shadow Sun event, which Black Legion characters are required for. So that's something to keep in mind. And in my personal opinion, he just has a very lackluster passive. It really requires him to ramp to really get the most out of it. It scales quite poorly, all things considering. And to get the most benefit out of it, you'd have to kill characters. And outside of PvP, that's not really happening. The RNG aspects of Harkin and his battle fatigue trait, and also the Let the Galaxy Burn trait, fear, he just doesn't really exceed average in this case. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next character. And back to the wheel we go. 2 characters down, 13 to go. And it looks like we are going to be getting Corodius. So Corodius is our second member of the Death Guard faction coming here, and has very similar traits to Malladus. Contagions of Nurgle and Resilient come in, but he does not have access to this Terminator armor. Jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit, this is a little unfortunate because he doesn't have Terminator armor, yet he's still restricted to movement 2, so he's got kind of that tank move speed without really that tanky aspect to him. Decent health, decent armor coming in, so a little bit of just inherent tankiness, but also has access to a defensive item for the first time in this tier list, and I personally am a fan of the defensive items over the block items, as I feel it gives you guaranteed tank stats instead of kind of rolling the dice on the RNG factor, which relying on that always is a bit unfortunate. Also, like Malladus and Harkin, this is another character that's coming into the faction with only a melee ability. A little ironic because his weapon is a gun, but it's going to be kind of important when we talk about a later character in this tier list. Now, Corodius' abilities really make him who he is. He is one of 3 summoners for the Chaos faction, and he is what I classify as a patient-type summoner. And what that means is essentially the more times that you wait and the longer that you hold on to your summon, the more potent it's going to be. His summon works hand in hand with his trait Contagions of Nurgle. As the blight spreads and he waits for his turn to use his ability, the more units he will be able to bring onto the map, as his summon will kind of take up or calculate the amount of available hexes inside of his blight aura, and then summon units based on the amount of available hexes that are available to him. Now, the Poxwalkers are very unique in the sense that they work pretty much like Archimatos in the sense that if they kill a unit, they spawn another Poxwalker. So it's pretty much a necro self-replicating army, and that's pretty cool. Now, the units cannot move themselves on their first turn, but they can attack if they spawn adjacent to something. Once again, really relying on that RNG factor. Now, let's take a look at his passive, where adjacent enemy psychers deal physical damage to themselves whenever they deal physical damage. Now, at max rank, because this is max rank 50, it's not that great. But the second portion of his ability is friendly chaos units starting their turn in adjacent hex get +1 movement for that turn. Now, this really helps other members of the Death Guard really overcome one of their biggest weaknesses. So all that taking into consideration, one of the big negatives for him is the fact that you can only get him through requisition orders. So get lucky or don't play with this character. All that taken into consideration, we have ultimately felt that he moves into the average tier alongside Harkin. We feel he performs better than Malleus because he is a summoner. His summoners can replicate themselves, and he also gives chaos units, specifically chaos units, extra movement. It's a little bit of a plus and a negative that he's a patient-type summoner, because sometimes for campaigns it's really hard to hold on and wait, especially since you're probably trying to 3-metal it. Not having access to those kind of bodyguards / tank bait to take those hits for you early on can be pretty rough in campaign and other game modes. However, if you are able to wait till turn 5 in, say, Onslaught, having access to your own little army is kind of fun. But ultimately, still, we feel he really falls into the average category, especially considering the fact that chances of you getting him all the way to Legendary, based purely off Rex, it's a little rough, buddy. Let's take a look at our next character. And back to the wheel we go. 3 characters are done, 12 to go. And we've got Typhus burning right through the Death Guard faction. Alright, so Typhus, just like Malleus and Corodius, has access to Contagions of Nurgle and Resilient. He's also bringing the Terminator armor back into play here, and he is a Psyker. Now, those 2 traits combined right there is fairly important because every other Psyker in the game so far is relatively squishy. He has access to the Plague Wind active and the Destroyer Hive passive. He is actually the first character on this list as well to have a ranged attack, so pretty trend-breaking so far for the Chaos faction. You look at his health, very high at max rank, decent-ish armor, but his movement speed, just like all the other Death Guard, is pretty abysmal. The Plague Wind active is really cool because it is just a massive psychic damage nuke and also has AoE to go along with it. Since it's so potent, they've made it so it doesn't combine with elevation, modifiers, and cannot crit, so something to keep in mind. He's also somebody that you don't want standing next to you if you're on the enemy team, because he does direct damage to an adjacent enemy after each turn. Or at the start of his turn, rather, at the end of your turn. However, just like other Death Guard members, sans Malleus, you can only get him through requisition orders, which is a little unfortunate, and he is a legendary character, so chances of getting him, depending on how many legendary characters that you have unlocked, it's at the very most 0.75% chance to straight up get him unlocked. One of the few characters that I do not even have access to. So, that taken into consideration, we've placed him in the strong category. And the reasoning is because he's a psyker, which by itself is not that fantastic, but he's a tanky psyker. This is important because there's certain legendary release event criteria where he'll come into play and be the only tank member in that lineup to really survive. Also, the fact that there is a lot more psyker synergy in the game with the coming of the Thousand Suns, he might have some meta implications later. Now, granted, we aren't really taking the what-ifs into the scenario when we built this tier list, but I do feel it's worth mentioning. Him being a legendary unlock is also pretty beneficial for him in this regard because unlike other Chaos members that you will get just coming in, rare, uncommon, epic, he comes in at legendary, meaning you don't have to worry about trying to farm him on Onslaught or anything else to really get the most use out of him as a character. His big realm where he shines right now, aside from that legendary release event that we discussed, is going to be in PvP. Especially in early PvP to mid PvP, and even if you take him all the way to the max, his ability to come in and just straight nuke people is fun, and it's also pretty powerful. Now, the negatives to him and why he can't be top tier is because he really doesn't exceed in any sort of game mode outside of those two that we mentioned. He's decent in campaign, sure, but when it comes down to guild raids, when it comes down to really excelling in some of those categories, we feel he falls short. But definitely a strong character for sure. Let's move on. And back to the wheel we are. And we are going to get Pestilian. Really burning through the Death Guard here. So let's take a look at his stats. Pestilian Witherpuss is another Death Guard member coming in and has Contagions of Nurgle, Resilient yet again, and for the first time we're seeing the trait Puget Explosion. It's very similar to Explode if you're familiar with Aleph Null or if you're familiar with Morven Vol and other mechanical units, but essentially, whenever he dies, he deals 25% of his max health as direct damage to all adjacent units. Now, it won't hurt Death Guard units, so you can't go in and try to nuke Mortarion, but it's not going to matter because you can't take him to Mortarion anyway. He has a melee hit with one hit, and he has no ranged attack. One good thing for Pestilian is that his melee hit is direct damage, but it's fairly weak. Now, I talked to you earlier about take a look at the melee characters and how many melee characters that we have, and that's going to really kind of hurt him a little bit when we start talking about his viability and his abilities. His active is Foul Infusion, and it essentially allows all friendly Chaos units within his Contagion aura to deal extra direct damage on their next melee attack, which is great because Chaos units and his aura makes us semi-okay for a one-time use in campaign, but outside of that, kind of sucks. Now, we take a look at his passive ability, which now buffs ranged units. He can't figure out whether he wants to buff melee units or ranged units. Fortunately for him, it's going to be not just Chaos units, it's going to be all adjacent allies. They will deal an extra 3,000 blast damage at max rank on their ranged attacks. Now, it's not per hit. It is going to be one extra hit. And enemies defeated by these attacks are automatically overkilled. So, kind of beneficial for looking at maybe Necrons, because you have to overkill them or they just come back to life or have a chance to. So, something to keep in mind there. But he can only be obtained through requisition orders. Now, I probably gave it away with my tone of voice, but essentially, Pestilian falls all the way into the bottom tier, straight up past his character. You can only get him from requisitions. He comes to you at rare, meaning you have to invest in him. Now, we do have somebody that's a real big fan of Pestilian, and I can certainly see some of the niche uses that he would have. Ingvar was pretty upset when I put him all the way down here. He was like, dude, at least weak. Come on, please. It's like, no, man, not happening. And mainly the point is you have to get him to at least epic to be semi-viable in those niche situations. And I just feel he's not worth the investment. His active is very underwhelming, which is the only real benefit that he has coming into the campaigns, because we saw how many Chaos characters don't have ranged attacks, and also his low movement. Now, you saw some of his stats on the previous page that when he does get up there, he has decent stats. Not worth the investment for very niche cases. So, coming in at our first just straight up pass character, Pastilian. Moving right along, and I'm hoping we don't get number 5 for the Death Guard here. Do want to keep this random, and no, I get 1,000 Suns. Sweet. Yazagor, Fickle Fate. A very interesting character and the first one to really do what he does. But let's take a look at the first 1,000 Suns character, and the first time we're seeing Weaver of Fates. In any turn where 3 or more units have taken psychic damage, this unit will deal the maximum possible damage with its attacks and abilities. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, every single attack has a plus and minus 20% damage range, and that does take into account your actual base attacks as well. So if 3 units have taken psychic damage, then he will do the maximum extent possible, which is kind of cool. He has a melee attack, which is physical, and meh, physical sucks because of 1% pierce. However, this does help for certain criteria that we need physical damage for like legendary release events. So very niche use. His ranged attacks are also coming in at 1 hit and have a +2 range. And essentially, okay. Let's take a look at his stats, though, which really make Yazagor, in my personal opinion, aside from his ability. And at Legendary 2, he has 5,000 health and 1,000 armor. Very, very squishy. If anybody looks at him, he drops dead. Now, what makes him cool, though, and a little bit of a redeeming factor, is that he has the ability to essentially trade places with one of his Psyker buddies. His active targets a friendly Psyker. Until the beginning of his next turn, they both deal additional psychic damage. And then Yazagor will attack with his normal attack, and then teleport with that Psyker, and then that Psyker can then do whatever it wants to do. So pretty awesome. His passive, however, for each different unit that was dealt psychic damage this turn, Yazagor gets extra damage for his attacks. So it really works in synergy with his Weaver of Fates trait, and if 3 or more different units have been dealt psychic damage, he gains 1 extra movement, and he gets extra range, which is pretty cool. He can be obtained from both the Samhain campaign and unlocks at common, so you should be able to get him fairly quickly if you want. 5 days, maxing out his battle, you should be able to unlock him as a character. And of course, requisition orders. But all that being said, yes, he's a cool character. I ultimately feel he joins Pastilian all the way down at the pass tier. And the reasoning for this is because he's squishy. Really, first and foremost, he's squishy. And that means he doesn't really excel in any game mode. Yes, he has great niche uses in PvP. Super fun to use. But we'll talk about a huge drawback with him when it comes down to PvP. Now, I also want to talk about him not being a Psyker. His whole identity plays around psychic damage. His passive, his Weaver of Fates, everything else. But he deals heavy damage and physical damage. So, a little bit of a cross-synergy issue there, I feel. Now, it wouldn't make sense for him to be a Psyker coming in with his bow and everything else, but I feel that really kind of hurts him as a character. Now, I do have listed that he's fun to use in PvP and the cross considerations. Now, the reason that I feel he really falls short into being raised into the weak or average tiers because of this is for one simple reason. Overwatch. He has a range of 2, and Overwatch dominates the meta in tournament arena and also just general arena, right? You have Ravos coming in, you're seeing a lot of Malgan Ra for just straight up normal arena. For tournament arena, you're seeing Ravos, Kalandis, you're seeing Sark as well. Anybody looks at Yazagor he melts, and he needs to be within range to use his ability to bring a Psyker in to do things. So I feel like that's really where his drawback comes in and really places him into that pass tier. Snowprint, if you're listening, you want him to be a good character, give him Infiltrate. Just do it. His unique ability may have meta uses in the future, especially since we're seeing that the new raid boss is supposed to be a strategic boss, and he can fly, so there are some redeeming qualities, but ultimately, I feel they're not enough. We have our first 1,000 suns out of the way, and we are back to the spinning wheel to see who we get next. And we got ourselves Angrax. Once again, taking a look at a Black Legion character, he has the Let the Galaxy Burn trait, but his big creme de la creme, I feel, coming in here is his Deep Strike when it comes down to traits. First time we're seeing this, in this unit's first turn only, you may instantly move to any free hex on the battlefield that is not adjacent to an enemy unit. It cannot be attacked until after this move. He also has Terminator armor. These things combined make him very beneficial for onslaughts, legendary release events, campaign. Like, you just get so much mileage out of that Deep Strike. And especially since if you know anything about the Fall of Cadia campaign, those las cannons all coming in with Overwatch, he's able to soak up a lot of those, combine with Terminator armor, and really survive and allow the rest of your team to do a lot. So the fact that he's not only required for the campaign, but he's also really beneficial to have for the campaign, really increase my opinion of him. Now he, once again, is going to be another melee-only unit for the Chaos faction, but I feel that's fine. He's pretty tanky. You look at his endgame stats, he has health all the way at 8,400, his armor coming in at 2,300, very tanky unit. Unfortunately, his low movement does hinder him slightly, but Deep Strike I feel more than makes enough for that. Now, Bringer of Despair coming in is going to be his active ability, and essentially it's a pretty strong melee cleave that he can use once, and will trigger Battle Fatigue twice. So you get double chance to make different units around him flee. Pretty satisfying. Now, our favorite part of Angrax is going to be his Hateful Assault. If he comes into contact with its melee target this turn, he deals additional damage. And enemy units that move away from him will take automatic power damage from him. This is very satisfying because if you park him next to a spawn node on legendary release events or onslaughts, he essentially plays Angrax Whack-A-Mole, and anybody that tries to move away from him will take a lot of damage. It will also add in that initial damage from Hateful Assault combined with that power damage coming in. He can be farmed in Fall of Cadia Mirror campaign. He's also the character that you get from Onslaught crates and, of course, Requisition orders. Now, the first two coming in will automatically guarantee that you'll get this character fairly early on, which means you're going to have him ready to go fairly soon for the campaign. All that taken into consideration, I feel that Angrax is coming in right at the tippy top for the strong tier list. Now, one thing that I do want to take a look, and I haven't talked about so far, is that I've not only organized these characters in order from top to bottom, but also the furthest left that you see them on in the tier list means that I feel that they're stronger than other characters in that section. So I personally feel that Angrax is stronger than Typhus, and that Harkin is a better character than Corodius. And Pastilian and Yazagor, they're just kind of down there. But let's take a look at why I feel he's so strong. I've mentioned the easy access. He's required for campaign, and not only is he required, but he's damn good at it. Terminator armor and the Deep Strike just means he's tanky, absorbs Overwatch, it's fantastic. And that amazing passive makes him an absolute menace when it comes to legendary release events and Onslaught. His big negative coming in is the fact that he doesn't have ranged attacks, oh well, and that he has low movement, but it's made up for by the Deep Strike. So, Dracthus Angrax coming in is a very strong character for Chaos. A little more than halfway to go, and we are back to the wheel to see who we get next, and the answer, it's going. Now, Nauseous Rotbone is going to be, I think, our last member of the Death Guard faction coming here, so yet again, picking up Contagions of Nurgle and Resilient, but for the first and only time on our list today, we have Healer. His abilities will also synergize well into his healing identity, but first let's take a look at the fact that he's, once again, a melee-only character. So, Pastilian, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? Looking at his stats, he kind of comes in fairly tanky with 9,000 health and 2k armor at max rank. But the big things here are his abilities. His active, Revitalizing Malignancy, heals himself and all adjacent units for 4,000 health. At max rank, it's 3,500, and an additional double that if they're Chaos. But can heal Imperial units, no big deal. We have a different character to handle that anyway. His passive is awesome as well. An adjacent friendly Chaos unit that dies has a 75% chance to resurrect. Pretty good odds. Now, mind you, this is at max rank. It's 75% all the way from 0 to 50. Even if overkilled. However, you can only do it once. Now, a little bit of a negative to this is it will also res summons. So, if a summon dies and gets res, you can't use it for an actual character. So, a little bit of a negative there. Another negative to Nauseous Rotbone as well is the fact that he can only be obtained from requisition orders. So, your only healer coming just straight up from Rex, a little unfortunate. So, the fact that he is the only Chaos healer really puts him into that strong category for me. Coming in right behind Ingrax, but above Typhus, I feel that our last member of the Death Guard faction really deserves to be in that strong category. He's a Chaos healer, and his revives are clutch. He comes in and is very useful for the campaign if you have him. And honestly, just those reasons alone really place him where we've placed him, up into that strong category. Now, some negative considerations for him are going to be that low movement that's staple across the entire Death Guard faction, and the fact that requisitions only. So, take it with a grain of salt. A really quick one to go through, but Nauseous Rotbone, strong character. We've passed our halfway point and only have 7 characters to go, and we are going to be landing on the newest character of the game, Ozek Ahriman. So let's take a look at his stats, and this might be the first time that you're seeing what he can do all the way at Legendary 2, or maybe just straight up seeing what he can do for the first time altogether. Another Thousand Suns character, and the Legendary for the Thousand Suns character, he has Weaver of Fates, like they all do. He also has Flying, and he's a Psyker. He has access to Crit Item, Block Item, and Crit Booster. And his melee ranged attacks are coming in pretty interesting here, and the reason I say that is because of the synergistic values that they have. His melee is a one-hit flame attack, and his ranged is a one-hit psychic attack. His stats are fairly decent, not too great, not too terrible, but his damage profile is pretty good. Now granted, it's only a one hit, so you're only applying that max damage one time, so take that with a grain of salt. Where he really comes to be an interesting character is going to be his abilities. Doombolt at rank 50 deals 3 times, you see the damage range there, psychic damage, evenly distributing the hits between all enemies within 2 hexes. It now adds 1 hit for each hex on the battlefield that is currently on fire. So yes, that can scale all the way up to 9 hits. Now, what I'm not certain about is if this synergizes with characters like Calgar, or if it synergizes with characters like Eldrion. More testing needs to be done. But what's really unique about this ability, and is very exciting, that if he defeats an enemy with his normal ranged attack, and Doombolt has already been used, it refreshes the cooldown. One thing that I'm also not certain about is that if he attacks using Doombolt, if it refreshes. The way that it reads, I'm inclined to think not, that he actually has to use his base ranged attack. This is really exciting for me to see, because I have talked about one of the biggest ways that Snowprint can balance this game and really bring new life to characters is by adding cooldowns to abilities instead of them just being a one and done, so I'm excited to see this. Now, his passive ability is pretty cool as well. Whenever an enemy unit anywhere on the battlefield that is on a hex with fire takes flame damage or psychic damage, this damage is increased by 50% to a maximum of, in this case, it's going to be 5,500 damage. So, a lot of fire synergy coming in here. A lot of that psychic synergy coming in here as well. And it really has me excited for Ahriman. He can be obtained from the Samhain campaign and also requisition orders. Now, unfortunately, with all of that ifs and, theory crafting going on, we're going to have to put him in the lax testing category, unfortunately for now. I feel that I would be doing you all an injustice if I placed him where I think he's going to end up. You focus the character and then he falls short. If I had to place him in a category now, I would probably put him in that top tier, in that strong category, but I just can't be sure. The numbers look right, the possibilities look right, but he really needs a roster to be built around him to really excel, and I just don't know if that's going to hurt him. So, falls into that lax testing category, unfortunately. 3 characters to go, and it's 50% chance whether we get Black Legion or Thousand Suns, so I'm excited to see what we get here. And the answer is Toth. Sokar Toth is our 3rd Thousand Suns character coming into this list and bringing back Weaver of Fates. He also has Terminator armor, and for the first time we are seeing suppressive fire. An enemy hit by this unit's ranged attacks will become suppressed. This is really great for denying overwatch, reducing damage. Suppression is one of my favorite traits, or kind of debuffs that you can apply. He has a melee attack and a ranged attack, and if you remember what we just talked about with Ahriman, his fire ranged attack is going to actually provide some synergistic bonuses with Ahriman. Now, he's coming about middle of the pack when it comes to health, and decently there in the armor, but his movement too, because of that Terminator armor, is going to be a negative here. His Hellfire missile rack is pretty cool. It's the first time that we're seeing kind of based on what damage kind of really applies. And he will target an enemy unit within range 3, so longer than his normal ranged attack. And he will attack them with the actual first attack, and then he will also subsequently hit every enemy unit on the map that was dealt psychic damage that turn, which could include his initial target. So really spreading it out. Really requires psychic synergy though. Now his passive, Time Flux, at the beginning of his turn he heals for damage that he took based on the last he received. He also leaves a Time Ghost behind him on the hex that he moved from. Now, it vanishes if it becomes occupied or it becomes impassable, like broken ice. And the first time that he dies each battle, he can revive there. So that's pretty cool too. Very unique abilities that we're seeing coming out of the Thousand Suns. A lot to get excited about. But let's take all of that in and look at where we rank him. And ultimately, I just don't feel it's cool enough, or it does enough. And the biggest reason is going to be his low movement coming in here, but also the active ability really requires a lot of setup to be beneficial, requires you to build a roster around him, but also at the same time with his low movement, getting in range of that initial target, yes, it is range 3, I feel is pretty hampering. I feel it would be really cool if you could deep strike in with Yazagor, Abraxas, whoever else that you wanted to go in, and then he could sit at base and just lob missiles in. That would be awesome. But he does require to be in range of one target, and I feel that kind of hurts him. He does have Terminator armor, he does have a survivable passive, and he has that niche active. I just don't feel it's enough to move him into that average tier. Let me know if you disagree. Think he's a cool character, just don't think he's strong yet. Maybe with some Ahriman synergy, we'll see if that changes. Back to the wheel we go, and 33% of the characters remain, and we get Abraxas. Now, I'll be honest, and a little bit biased, Abraxas is probably my favorite Chaos unit in the game. He came in, I love the Thousand Suns aesthetic, and the fact that he's a summoner too, and the way that he works is fairly unique. So let's go ahead and talk about him. Once again, Weaver of Fates and Psyker coming back into play. And he also has the melee flame hit and ranged psychic hit, which is fairly cool. In terms of tankiness, like all Psychers, sans Typhus, he's pretty squishy, but don't worry, he can summon an army of cannon fodder to really help him out with his summon ability. And it works in a very unique fashion compared to other summoners. He'll summon a pink horror and a free hex, which can ranged attack and deal psychic damage. Now, since it dealt psychic damage and any other psychic damage that happens on the map, he will then summon a Screamer of Tzeentch on a free hex adjacent to him, preferring hexes adjacent to friendly or enemy units. And then they will automatically attack too, dealing a melee hit, which is awesome because of Abraxas's passive ability. Friendly Chaos units adjacent to Abraxas deal additional psychic damage with their normal ranged attacks. Affected demons, which are his summons, also gain the bonus hit on their normal melee attacks. That means his Screamers will then attack something and spawn additional Screamers. If you synergize him with Yazagor, you can then move him to a different spot of the map and keep this chain going. He can summon up to 12 units by himself in one turn, which is far exceeding any other summoner in the game. Just absolutely fantastic. There's a lot to be said about the potential synergy for Northrop, with Yazagor, with Ahriman. I think Abraxas has a very high ceiling, but ultimately, I feel that he just falls into the strong category at the moment. He's a summoner that can summon up to more than 6 characters. He's a chaos buffer in the sense that he buffs the range attacks and melee attacks of demons, which do include Archimados' Bloodletters. He's a Psyker, and honestly, if it wasn't for Abraxas, I would not have been able to finish the Elite Fall of Cadia campaign. Absolutely clutch there. The only negative thing that I can think about Abraxas is the fact that he's squishy, but he also requires a little bit of setup for his summons to be money. So, Abraxas falls into the strong category, right behind Rotbone, because I think the Chaos Healer, that's just really hard to beat up. Now for the moment you've most likely been waiting for, or have skipped to. It's time for our character giveaway. As mentioned earlier, we are giving away one full Abraxas unlock, and here's how you can get a chance to win. First, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Second, comment down below with what you would change on this tier list, minus of course the characters that need testing. And finally, tune into the Chaos tier list update video where we will be announcing the winner of this giveaway. I will also be replying to your comment to let you know you've won as well and give you instructions on how to claim your prize. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy the rest of the tier list. Let's head into the next character. 4 to go, back on the wheel, 25% chance to get any of the remaining characters, and we get our last Thousand Sun member. Thalmachus. Once again, coming in as a Thousand Sun member, has Weaver of Fates. You've heard it 4 times now. He has flying, and he is another Psyker coming to the party. He has the melee flame hit. He has the ranged psychic hit, so definitely some synergy there with Ahriman. Definitely coming in to really work on that Weaver of Fates with the other units as well. And for the first time, I feel like we have a full faction that really works all within each other and really help each other out. So great job, Snowprint. Really happy to see a lot of this actual faction synergy here. Now, his stats, he comes pretty squishy side along with most Psychers. Has decent movement though. But his abilities are where he's really interesting here. He has attempted possession, and this is what really makes him a unique unit. He targets an enemy within 2 hexes. That target and enemy summons that they have summoned become possessed and immediately perform a normal attack against the closest enemy unit, preferring unpossessed targets. Possessed units deal 100% of their own damage up to the maximum of 5,500 in this case. Now, mind you, this is at rank 50. At common, uncommon, so on and so forth, that percentage is going to be less, and the max damage is going to be less. Possessed summons will move before attacking. Possessed units will not. And I say this because it's going to kind of play into some of the testing that I did do. His passive is Arcane Shield, very similar to how Aleph Null will heal units when his turn ends. Instead, Thalmachus gives a shield. It's pretty cool because he can do this in a ranged fashion, preferring Thousand Suns units, then other Chaos units, and then other friendly units. So it's nice to see not only does he have a priority matrix, but that priority matrix is also listed in the ability, so there shouldn't be too much confusion. Now, he will use it on himself if nobody else gets it. So that's pretty nice. I feel with how squishy it is, I'd almost prefer he just do it to himself every turn. But, I mean, you are able to game it out in some fashion. Now, this character has been in the game for a little bit, but ultimately, I don't feel enough testing has either A, been done, or B, made public, and I haven't done enough myself. Fellow guildmates in Celestive Lions or IVS have not done a lot of testing for him as well. I used him in several tournament arena battles, and that's kind of where I got a little bit of my feel for him. And ultimately, very niche, kind of hard to use, easy to counter in terms of PvP. The fact that the melee attacks, you can't really make an enemy unit move. The percent damage kind of fell short a little bit. Like, I grabbed a Calandus with a multi-hit buff and shredded somebody, but I would rather just have a strong character that can hit somebody on their own accord, right? Like, yes, cool, oh, you got a melee buff, but if you're not next to anybody, I can't control you and really melee. And if you see that I have Thalmachus, you're probably not going to drop your army of summons. So, pretty easy to counter. Now, he placed in the lax testing tier more so than weak. And the reason is, I'm not sure how he will perform on guild raids. I haven't really used him. The questions that I have are, if I take, say, Corodius, for example, and I grab all of his Poxwalkers, are they just all going to be friendly units and not be able to attack each other? Is it worth doing? Will they kill each other? If they kill somebody, will they spawn another unit for me? There's a lot of question marks. If I do it to the Tyranids, is that damage profile going to be enough to actually warrant that one-time active use? Do I have to bring him in with, say a Norothrop to gain the full potential to actually have him on a roster? With all these theory crafting and what-ifs, ultimately, I just feel he still falls short, even if there is really good guild raid potential there, and I'm going to place him in the average tier. I don't feel he's going to be too beneficial in terms of campaign. There's not a lot of summons that happen in campaign. The shield's nice, but it's not enough to really take him into the strong or top tier without further testing. So, I don't want to do anybody a disservice and place him. Still needs more testing. We'll let you know. If you have opinions on where he should fall, let me know down in the comments. Really love to see him. 3 characters to go, ladies and gentlemen. We are almost done. And we are going to get Abaddon. Oh, Ezekiel Abaddon. The Despoiler. Another Black Legion character coming in, and he has Let the Galaxy Burn, Resilient, and Terminator armor. Pretty decent melee hit here with 5 hits. He's got a ranged attack as well, which breaks the mold a little bit here for most Chaos characters. And looking at his base stats, like the armor's kind of low-ish at max rank. Health is decent, not the greatest that we've seen. But let's take a look at his abilities here. And first we have Draknien. And he's going to attack in melee and use both weapons. So he's going to deal 3 melee hits and then 5 more melee hits. And then he sets his health to whatever value the ability is set at. In this case, 3,000. So there becomes a big no-no, right? Like, it's great for a heal if you're at, 1 health, your resilient trait is there, and then you go back to 3,000 health. But if you use this on turn 1 and you had more health than when you use this ability, you're going to drop down to that 3,000. Now, his passive ability comes in and synergizes really well with all the Black Legion characters. Friendly Chaos units and hexes surrounding him deal an additional 500 damage at max rank, and then all friendly units with that Let the Galaxy Burn trait score 1 additional hit whenever the trait is triggered. So a 50% chance. You can get him from the Fall of Cadia Mirror campaign, and you get him from Requisition Orders, and he is going to be the Black Legion's only legendary character. So what does that mean? Where do we place him? And I think he's an average character. He falls, in my personal opinion, below Harkin, mainly because Harkin's required for the campaign. Now, he's got flying, he's got Terminator armor, he's resilient and has that heal with his active. He's a chaos buffer. But the problem is the fact that he has an RNG passive to apply with the RNG trait, right? And he's a legendary character. You would have to hard grind him out, 500 shards, or hope that you get, that at most 0.75% chance from a requisition order. And then you get him, and then he's just really underwhelming. I feel like there's a lot that can be done to make this character really, really good. He just needs a little bit to nudge him in the right direction. First and foremost, I think that his chaos buff should probably be on par with the likes of Calgar, or the likes of Darkstrider, or anybody else. He's a legendary character, for fuck's sake. Also, I think that maybe making the Let the Galaxy Burn trait be a guaranteed instead of a 50% chance would be another thing that could really help him come in and break into that strong or even top tier category. I definitely think if he gave every Black Legion character an additional hit guaranteed, or 2 additional hits guaranteed if you wanted to take him that far, would be so strong. The Black Legion would be just great as a faction, period. But, unfortunately, he doesn't have those things, and I just feel he's average. 2 characters to go. Let's see who we will get. And we got ourselves an Archimatos, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about him. Another Black Legion character. He has Let the Galaxy Burn, and he is a Psyker. He was previously the only real Psyker that you could guarantee that you would get for the Chaos faction, because Typhus was so RNG dependent. So, has 2 hits on his melee, 1 hit on his range. That's pretty nice that he has both Psychic on his melee and his ranged attacks. It's pretty cool. And, like all other Psykers, fairly low base stats. But, he's a summoner. He summons a Bloodletter adjacent to an enemy target, and will continuously summon those Bloodletters around that target up to a max of 7. So, able to get 7 summons on turn 1, fantastic. Now, these Bloodletters are really cool because if they come into contact with their enemy target, or if the enemy target is a Psyker, they deal an additional hit, which is very important. His passive comes in his possession. Each time Archimatos defeats an enemy unit, and I just actually noticed for the first time, the Archimatos defeats an enemy unit, a Bloodletter is summoned in its hex. The Bloodletter stats, pretty similar to, or exactly the same as the active ability summons, but the fact that Archimatos can continuously summon units as the match progresses is pretty important for him as a character. You can get him from the Guild Store, the Fall of KDM Mirror campaign, and requisition orders, so he's definitely going to be a character that you want on your list. So much so, in fact, that we put him at top tier. First character in the Chaos faction to join this prestigious rank. And the reasoning is because he's a summoner that can immediately summon 7 units on the first turn. He can then summon on all, subsequent kills that he gets. Now, granted, his Bloodletters don't actually net him kills, so they don't duplicate themselves like Poxwalkers, but it's fine. He's anti-Psyker. You drop those Bloodletters on a Psyker, they're going to be taking a lot of damage. Great for PvP as an anti-Psyker, but also great for guild raids, as we have 2 of 4 guild raids are Psykers, Mortarion and the Tyranids. He is required for campaign, and he does great for the campaign. The Bloodletters will soak up a lot of hits. Now, unfortunately, he is a little squishy, so if he does get hit by a las cannon, he's going to have a bad day, but hopefully the Bloodletters will be around to take that hit for him. And like I said, he's great in multiple guild raids. Even if you don't want to bring him for Gazgul or Silent King, right? Not the greatest for those, but he's still usable. And not only that, but his summons come in are very beneficial for bosses with the Boss Adjutant trait. So Archimatos is just all around a great character. Synergizes super well with also the Thousand Suns being a Psyker. A lot of potential for him. definitely deserves that top tier slot. Last and spoiler alert, not least, ladies and gentlemen, we have Volk, our last Chaos character and last character for the Black Legion. He also has Let the Galaxy Burn, which I feel is pretty important to mention, and for the first time, he's also a demon and big target. Now, demons have an additional 25% chance to block, which is kind of cool, and big target, kind of a negative for him here because he is a very, very glass cannon squishy character. Benefits less from cover, but he is able to help friendly units out a little bit. Now, what I really like about Volk is he is a range 3, 6-hit character. That's going to be very important for us to take a look at. The negative, however, is that he has a movement of 2. He has Frenzied Firing on his active ability, which means that he is able to attack all units within his range, and each one of them gets his suppressive fire applied. So, if he's in the middle of an enemy team, he can suppress up to 6 of them, which is fan-frickin-tastic. Also, a great counter to Ravos because he outranges Ravos and is able to suppress him. Now, what also really makes Volk good is his flesh metal guns. A 30% chance of adding additional heavy round damage and pierce ratio to all of his ranged attacks. This would also apply to his additional attack if Let the Galaxy Burns procs. Now, let's take a look at where we placed him. And ultimately, he falls into the strong tier above Rotbone. And the reasoning for this is he is the second best ranged multi-hitter. The only character I feel that does better than him is going to be Malgan Ra. His +3 range is fantastic, and he suppresses on all attacks. Not only that, but also at the same time, he has a 6-hit, which is fantastic, but he's then also able to excel above a character like Immospec, not necessarily Ravos in some terms, but he's able to surpass Immospec because he has a 50% chance to get an additional hit, and then a 30% chance to buff all of his hits. His damage potential is extremely high, especially when combined with Eldrion. Now, some negative considerations to this are going to be the low movement. You have a lot of damage volatility coming in here because of a 50% and 30% chance to do what he needs to do, and he's squishy. But ladies and gentlemen, if you do not have Malgan Ra and you want to take guild raids seriously, then you want to farm Volk. He unlocks at rare 130 shards coming in there for you. A great addition to your roster. Cannot stress how important this character is for guild raids if you don't have Malgan Ra. And I ultimately feel like his low movement, his squishiness, and the fact that he is second best in this category does not put him in the top tier, but he's damn close to going into that top tier range. So let's do ourselves a little recap here. Coming in at the top tier, we have Archimados as an incredibly strong anti-psyker summoner, and he's a psyker himself. In the strong tier, Angrax, his mileage for the campaign, onslaught, legendary release events is just so good. Volk being a budget Malgan Ra and doing the job pretty damn well, minus the movement. Very important for guild raids, is also in the strong tier. Nauseous Rotbone, a healer, gotta love him. Abraxas has so much potential and might even move up to the top tier one day, but right now coming at strong. Typhus, just a tanky psyker, and that's the only reason he's there, to be honest. The average tier, Harkin, he's okay. Abaddon is the most underwhelming legendary in the game. And Corodius is a psyker, he's a summoner, anti-psyker-ish, but okay. Ahriman and Thalmakis just kind of lacking that testing here. Toth and Malladus just relatively being weak with the low mobility and very niche uses. And then Pastilian and Yazagor just completely underwhelming. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd love to give a huge special thanks to my advisors for this list, Ingvar, Macero, Stefan, POH Probes, and Yorad here. Thanks for all the feedback and your opinions in making this list. Big shout out to my editor, DZG Muse. He's going to make this video look way more pretty and awesome than I could ever dream of doing. And the biggest shout out has to definitely go to the IVS Alliance. Every single stat page you saw, every single ability that you saw come onto the screen, the infographics for those were pulled from the IVS data tool and bot that is located in Discord. has been instrumental not only for this video, but for us as a guild identifying what different breakpoints there are for abilities and stats and everything else and helping us with priorities. Has been absolutely fantastic. So, if you're interested in using this tool for yourself, go ahead and reach out to IVS and talk to the team there, or better yet, come join IVS. IVS has 19 guilds, 570 plus members, just one awesome cluster. There's going to be a Discord link for you to join. Go ahead and let us know if you want to join a guild, and just stay in touch. We'll find room for you. But that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it was awesome doing this tier list. Stay tuned and definitely give us your feedback. If there are things that you don't like in the format, in the style, in the way that we did this, there's 2 more tier lists coming at you. We're going to be doing the Imperials next, and then we're going to be doing Xenos. Eventually, we'll combine all of that into one massive tier list. That way you can kind of know, okay, I know what characters to prioritize for my badges and my orbs, but what about just item upgrades and energy in general? We really want these tier lists to be able to guide you on your Tacticus journey, or maybe just be a point of entertainment if that's what you look at it for. After the big combined tier list, we're also going to maybe look at ranking all of the abilities in the games, faction specific, and other things like that. So please let me know down in the comments what you think, ways that I can make this better for you. I really want this to be a tool everybody can use to really level up your gameplay. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, thanks for tuning in. Peace.